Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Norm, and this is episode 12 of the Evangelical Norm. And tonight I want to talk about consistency. And I guess I've already talked about it a little bit, but it gets worse and worse as you continue to watch social media and things that are going down. There's just this severe lack of consistency, apparently on all sides and most worldviews. And so, as Christians, we've got to really maintain consistency in our worldview to separate ourselves from what is just the conservative right and what is absolutely the left. The thing that drummed this up is the article that's going around um, on Life News right now, which is Black Pastors Demand Smithsonian Remove Statue of Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger. And it makes sense. Believe me, if I ever wanted to see the history of a single person completely wiped out, it would be the history of Margaret Sanger and everything that history has led to, which is Planned Parenthood, which is abortion on demand, without apology, and it would just be phenomenal to just wipe out the memory of this woman off of the face of the planet. I would have no problem with that. But herein lies the problem. This is something that is huge on the right. This is these black pastors that are demanding this, and Ted Cruz is spearheading this apparently. And there's a lot of conservatives that are on board with this, and rightly so. But the problem is many of those same people are opposed to seeing Confederate statues and flags removed. And so herein lies the problem. And again, on the left, they will fight this tooth and nail because Margaret Sanger is a hero to the left. But yet they are going to hammer home and tell every statue of Robert E. Lee and anybody from the Confederate side, any general, any historical figure from Confederacy and the Confederate flag is nowhere to be found. But the problem is none of these worldviews have any consistency. If you're going to claim that taking down statues is removing history, and I've heard this thrown out on Twitter and so on, and people who forget their history are doomed to repeat it. So the argument for keeping Confederate statues up of Civil War memorials of the Confederacy is that we have to remember our history or else we're doomed to repeat it. And if that's the case, then that applies to Margaret Sanger as well. And we have to remember what vileness this woman has uh, put forth, and we have to remember it. So it would mean we would have to change the narrative, and that therein is the key, is changing the narrative of what the Smithsonian statue and display about Margaret Sanger says. We need to change the narrative. People need to know that this woman was a vile racist. This woman spoke at Klan rallies. And yet, the left, who is okay with Antifa going in and using violence to suppress the KKK, are lauding a woman who spoke to Klan rallies, was a keynote speaker for the KKK, who in those speeches talked about black people being human weeds and wanting to eliminate them. This is what Margaret Sanger was about. It's the reason why Planned Parenthood shows up in so many poor neighborhoods and ethnocentric neighborhoods, and why probably a large majority of uh, babies that are aborted at Planned Parenthood are African American babies or Latino babies. And there are some places where the abortion rate among African Americans is actually higher than the birth rate. This is what Margaret Sanger has wrought. And it's vile and it's disgusting. And that's what the Smithsonian needs to have. And if that's not the narrative that they're going to display, then yeah, the display needs to be gone. Because if they're giving us a false history of who this woman was, then it does no good. So again, I mean, the whole point of it is to just, as Christians, we need to maintain this level of consistency. If we are going to complain about the left wanting to remove statues, then we can't come out and demand that the Smithsonian remove a statue that we don't agree with. We can't. If we're going to get mad at them for doing it, then we can't turn around and do it. Yeah, and vice versa. If we're going to demand that anything be done, if you're on the left and you're going to demand that statues be removed, then you should be on board with these black pastors, because this is a horribly offensive display for them. And if you're against anybody being offended for any reason at any time, then you should be on board with these people. But yet, the people on the left, MSNBC and all of them, are going to fight these pastors tooth and nail. So again, it's this worldview, these worldviews that come up, and so often we forget that when Jesus gave us the golden rule, he didn't say do unto others as they have done unto you, but it's do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We don't treat others as they have treated us, and that's far too many Christians, and I've witnessed it. I've seen it among people that I know and I love. There are people that I've seen who have shared this article, who are 100% behind it, but those same people have said that other statues shouldn't be torn down. And it's inconsistent, and what that does for the Christian is it kills our credibility. And so when we try to present the gospel to people, we no longer have a credible argument to present, because we've lived in this shadow because of conservatism, because of republicanism, because of Trumpism, whatever it is. We've lived in this place where we've lost our consistent worldview in line with what the Bible says and not with what conservative culture says. So I want to encourage you guys, go back and look at the things that Jesus said, and look at what the Christian worldview is about, and find consistency, when we're looking at these things, when we're looking at people who want to remove statues. And right now I'm not sure where I am with either one of them. I'm not sure if I'm okay with removing Confederate statues, and that means I don't know if I'm really okay with moving this Margaret Sanger display. Ultimately, it comes down to the same thing. I want the history and the narratives to be accurate. When there are memorials and statues to Confederate soldiers, I want it to be said that they were fighting for slavery. Whether that was what it was intended to be, whether it was, their intention was states' rights. Sure, that they wanted the states to have the freedom that the states should have. And I would like to see that now. I would like to see the states able to outlaw abortion as they need to, as they feel like it, as the constituents. Well, and that's only a small step. That's not all the way. I want to see abortion abolished. I want to see abortion absolutely illegal across the nation. But I want the states to be able to do that individually, because that's states' rights. The federal government shouldn't be involved in that. But every state should understand that life begins at conception, and abortion is murder, and it should be all outlawed. But the narrative needs to be right. States' rights was truly, the fight for states' rights was only because the federal government was going to come in and remove the institution of slavery. It wasn't over anything else. It was the states' rights to legalize or make illegal slavery. And that was what they were fighting for, and that should be what the narrative is, and that was wrong. And it's the same thing now. We are talking about the mass murder of people that a majority of our nation and our populace do not consider people. And it's the same argument that was the argument for slavery. And so all of this, abortion needs to go, but we can keep the Margaret Sanger displays if we're going to keep Confederate displays, but let the narrative be accurate. And if we're not going to have accurate histories about these things, then knock them all down. Then get rid of them. Until the history can be presented accurately, they should be gone. Because perpetuating false, revised history is just as bad as anything else. So I just want to encourage you guys with that today. Examine your worldview. Look and see if you are truly being consistent. And then pick a side. This is one way or the other, whether you want to keep the statues with a appropriate history or get rid of them. One way or another, pick a side. I don't think one is right over another, but we need to be consistent. We can't have the same people who are pushing to remove the statue of Margaret Sanger from the Smithsonian and the same person saying not to tear down a statue of Robert E. Lee or other Confederate soldiers or whatever they are. We have to have consistency as Christians, folks. Because if not, again, we lose our credibility. And credibility is important when presenting the gospel. We've got to have it. We've got to maintain our integrity as people, as Christian people, so that when we present the gospel to people, they know that we live in a consistent lifestyle and a consistent worldview, and that this worldview, the gospel, is what makes us consistent. So I just want to leave that with you guys, and let you think on that for a while. So again, as always, preach the gospel, use words, they're necessary. Soli Deo Gloria.